Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Meeting Protocol Monthly Podcast, where we chat with some of the coolest people in the business and bring you useful and relevant information about what's happening in the world of meeting planning. I am Dora Figueredo, the head of events and education at Meeting Protocol, coming to you from New Jersey, as always. As event professionals, we are well versed in connecting people and bringing them joy through spaces and experience that we bring to life. Often these are extracurricular. For those of you listening, I'm putting it in air quotes, meaning events that attendees experience outside of their normal workday or routine. Equally important, however, and not as visible, is how people feel in the places that they spend the majority of their waking hours on any given day, which is their job. I would argue that most people have a lot of feelings about how they spend their working day and the place, whether it's in their living rooms or a home office or an actual office with other folks in it. Um, but they don't really think about it in the way that an event planner would or an event professional would. Employee satisfaction from HR teams is often overlooked, not through their fault, but usually because it's not an organizational priority, or they maybe are just not prepared or too overwhelmed to think about that, or it's cobbled together with pizza parties. There's been a lot of memes on Twitter or X now, and TikTok about like, don't give me a pizza party, give me a raise. Or maybe having a ping pong table in the office, which was something I experienced 2 jobs ago, but people did make a lot of use of the ping pong table. So it actually worked out pretty well in the office. So whether you are in an office or still working from home, your company culture is likely something that you do think about a lot, but perhaps feel that you have no control over. So this month's guest, Diana Diller, is an expert in using events to develop internal company cultures that enhance the employee experience. Her area of expertise is establishing signature organizational initiatives and building experiences across global workforces to highlight and strengthen company values and culture. So I hope that you are all ready to take notes on today's episode. I know I am. I'm really thrilled to talk to you. So thank you so much, Diana, for being with us today. Tell us where you're joining us from and the background of what got you into the events industry.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of this. I am joining from my office, my company's office in Culver City in Los Angeles, where it's going to be nice and warm this weekend. So we're getting our LA weather. Let's see, I've been in the business of events for about 17 years now, which is crazy to say out loud. But I like to make sure that people know that that was not my original intention. I went to film school, actually. I wanted to be a film producer. I loved that feeling you would get when you would come out of a movie theater after seeing something and really just feeling so changed and like transported somewhere different, and that feeling you would get that would carry with you for the rest of the day. And so I went to film school and I was a student of film all through high school. So did it in college, came out to Los Angeles and was sure I wasn't going to stay, but, embarked on the entertainment industry and wanted to see what it was about. And I worked in the industry for a few years and then realized it was not a good fit. That wasn't the path forward for me. But I took stock of things, and I really still wanted to be that producer of transformative experiences. So I really thought about what that could look like and realized that I was the person who was planning events for all my friends and organizing things, like I've heard other guests of yours saying about their experience. And so I decided I would sort of start again, right? And I got really lucky. I was given sort of an entry-level position at a finance company in downtown LA. And I got to work with two amazing event planners, one who had been in the finance space her entire career. So she knew what those kinds of like fancy, golf spa, getaway sales meeting kinds of events looked like. And then the other gal on the team had worked pretty much exclusively in nonprofit. So she knew what it was like to make things look like $1 million, even if you had 10. So I got sort of this amazing education in that job that I hadn't gone to school officially, but they were the ones who sort of showed me the ropes, the ins and outs, and everything about event planning. So they were my school, they were my education.
That's great. I really love how many people in events don't initially intend to be in events, but then there's like one thing that happens in their life that just like completely changes the trajectory, and they're like, Oh, events is where it's at. And that's how I started out as a high school teacher. And so I definitely understand that feeling of like this is a great feeling. I want to do this forever instead.
Well, it's funny how, when you look at your life, it makes much more sense looking backwards than it does as you're going through it going forward. So I can see the through line now, but
Yeah.
at the time it felt like a really big change. But really, I think at the heart of a lot of planners, they've always had the heart of a planner.
Yeah, for sure. I love to tell people, now I'm not currently interviewing for a job, but when I do interview for jobs and they're like, that's an interesting career jump, I always say, I think that being a high school teacher was the best preparation that I could have gotten. Like I stood in front of an audience of 30 at a time, bored high schoolers who didn't want to be there. And I really had to like assess their needs and like what would take them to where they needed to be, what were the objectives for every single class every single day. And so it gave me an invaluable experience that I don't, not to say that hospitality programs can't give you those skills, but I'm not sure I would have gotten the same kind of training if I had gone to college for this instead.
And that's why you see a lot of people in events, I think, also who have psychology degrees because they really
Yeah.
understand people, what motivates them, and how they connect to the experiences you're putting together. I think that's also a great secondary skill set to bring to this industry.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about your entry specifically into internal employee events? And was your first role focused on this? Like, did you apply to the role intentionally to do this work?
Yeah, great question. When I started at this finance company, as I said, like I was just looking for any opportunity. I had done some interning, like working on weddings, and I was like, whoop, not for me. Tried sort of dipping a toe into a few different areas through volunteering. And so when I got this job in the corporate setting, it was a great training ground because I got to do internal and external events. So there was a little bit of everything. And like I said, these two wonderful mentors I had at this company really sort of gave me a good overview of like the nuts and bolts of how everything is done. So that's when I learned how to set up a ballroom, right? I knew how, to do all those basics. I took teams on road shows around the country. So I learned all about how to set a room in every different way you could possibly need, all the technical equipment at the time, all of those kinds of things, but and how people were selling the products, right? But what was really interesting was that I would come back and I knew more than other people at the company about the products we were selling and how we would talk about them to our clients. And this was something that HR was kind of aware of because people weren't really sure how they were pathing their career. Assistants couldn't figure out how to get to the next level. Folks couldn't figure out what their path was. And I said, well, I know more about what we're doing and how you do that because I hear the portfolio managers talk about this when we go all around the country, right? And so working with the head of HR, we built an internal training program, which we called our corporate university. And I worked with a tenured portfolio manager. So I knew nothing about finance and he knew nothing about gathering people for events, but we worked together to see how you can make that amazing impact when you understand what the product is that you're selling, what it is that your company's doing, what your clients and your customers want, then you can start to say, okay, we need to bring that back in and make sure people really understand that. So when you're building a program for your employee experience, it's not just we need learning and development and we need training, but really thoughtfully saying like employee experience isn't like just a holiday party or a picnic. Like, let's be really thoughtful about what it is that people need and not just say general learning and development, general parties and things. Let's merge these things and really be thoughtful about how we want to go about that. So we were able to see really clearly, quickly, that this training program was having a huge opportunity, both for the people who understood now, like, oh, this is how I get to that next level, or this is the other part of what's happening at our company and why I should be proud of working here. And hey, actually, maybe I'm more interested in that path than this one over here. But they also, I mean, they had greater employee satisfaction because they understood what they were doing and what their path was, what the people around them were doing, what they could be proud of. And the portfolio managers were our teachers. So they got to more closely connect with folks and really understand, what is the average person thinking who maybe doesn't understand our products. And then it was fun to see also because you would take this relationship that would be built in the classroom, and then when you did have a company picnic, you had people of all levels and from all different teams connecting with each other because they'd been sitting in a classroom together. It was a great equalizer to have folks all get together for these training programs. So that's the path that led me to sort of understand the value and impact that internal events have in turn, like on what you can do across a company, because it's the everyday for the employee, and that really means so much to them. So I love that I've gotten to do internal and external events and see how those things marry together, and the impact they can have.
It sounds like you're having a lot of fun. I can, like, really see the passion, like, in your eyes as you speak and hear it. Like, it sounds like you really have found a calling for yourself.
Yeah, I would never have picked it, right? I wouldn't have imagined. And there were certain stages in my career where I was more interested in getting into experiential marketing and external marketing. But again, I got pulled back and I said, I'm more interested in celebrating these products and these things that the employees make and helping people understand what's so great about them than I am necessarily in, celebrating them with the public. There's something about like bringing those pieces together that really is exciting for me. Yeah.
Yeah. So you did not study human resources in college, as you mentioned, though what you do requires a keen understanding, as you said. You brought up the psychology major. It really requires a keen understanding of how to build culture and trust among employees. And I think that this is very often an overlooked facet of the events industry by outsiders. Like, we have to constantly be in tune with and intentional about how to get attendees to build relationships. Like, there's so many. I think a lot of the most highly publicized events tend to just be flashy and cool and, like, but not necessarily deep. But everything you do is really deep. So how did you build this expertise? Do you work with HR to build content? I assume probably with team managers, group leaders. Yeah, I would love to know how you really, like, hone these skills.
Yeah, there's no one answer to that. And I think that's part of the fun. I think there's been points in my career where people have said, pick a lane, pick a lane. And I'm like, but I don't want to pick a lane. I like doing all the things. So, I've enjoyed having a lot of different paths and different partnerships in the way that I work, right? So as you said, I didn't go to school for this. So I trained on the job. And I think that is something that's hugely valuable. And you see, with the certifications you can get, you have to be doing the work, right? You can't just take a class and that's enough. You have to also include your volunteer time, your time
Yeah.
actually doing the job. So for instance, when I got my CMP, I did all the studying, I did all the things you need to do, of course. But, really when the rubber hit the road, it was doing that, the experience of doing it and what you learn from that. So for me, I learned a ton in my role. We had an events team at the finance company, I think, which was really, really rare, especially after the financial crash, that we were still there, but they really understood the impact of events internally and externally. I think it was helpful that we did both. Because we really could deepen our value, and partnering with everybody from the sales teams and the CEO to the heads of HR and their initiatives. So it didn't come from any one place. So when I was ready to move on, and sort of got pulled back towards entertainment, and started working in the video games industry where I have been for 10 years now, the opportunity I had, the sort of catch was that I was going to work exclusively on internal events. And at that point I thought, oh, I want to try experiential. They're doing such cool things, like video games are in this whole new phase. And they said, well, we'll bring you in doing internal events. And I said, okay, I do tons of those. That's great. So I definitely knew how to do that. Now, what was interesting was that I think at the time, 10, 11 years ago, people didn't understand the importance of the employee experience and culture as we do today. So
Yeah.
the CEO of that company, I think, was really innovative in the sense that he wanted a dedicated person to do this. And, I've sat with the comms team within HR, I've sat in marketing teams. I sit on the people team now. So I've sort of floated around because I don't think this role always has a clear place at every company. And I've definitely done, sort of chats with folks who reach out to me on LinkedIn or through my network and just say like, what's the job title? How do I find it? I'm like, it really depends on the company and the size of the company, right? And what you're trying to do. So in that particular instance, when I moved over, the CEO had created this role that was sort of a dedicated job specifically for internal. And he thought of it as somebody with a background in marketing, like he's like, we're marketing the company to the employees.
I
And
love
that
that.
and to this day, that's really how I think about my job. Like you hopefully have chosen this company because you were excited to work here. You love the product and service that we're providing. And yet you maybe somebody else is trying to steal you away because you're the best of best, or maybe you have a tough day and you're like, why do I work here? And this job, that I'm in, like, I want to find all these different ways to remind you that this is the place that you want to be. And that, so looking at it with that marketing lens, when I ended up working on the marketing team as an extension of that, again, it came back to like, what is the product that we're selling? In this case, it's the company itself and the experience you're going to have here. But then I would also think about like, what's the video game we just launched, right? So next thing I knew, I was out at, trade shows and Comic-Cons and E3s and things like that, making booths and, creating hands-on experiences for press, for gamers, for the average person. And so then I would take that back to the office and be like, okay, how do I bottle that excitement? And what was it that was really lighting them on fire in that experience with the public or with, these key folks who know so much about gaming? How can I bring that enthusiasm and excitement back to our gaming zone at the office, right? And make sure that people are feeling as enthusiastic and proud about that as possible. So I bounced around, and then in the sense that like wherever the company kind of needed a focus, but I was always the person that people would be like, oh, hey, we don't have a formal DEI program yet, but we want to celebrate International Women's Day. And I've got an amazing speaker we want to bring in and go make an event, right? So I've
Good
always
luck.
loved.
Go forth.
Yes, I'm like, okay, I know what we're gonna do. And we would want to like we brought in bands to perform, like up and coming musicians, and we would have amazing speakers. And then once we did have a formal DEI program, and like we do here at the company I'm at now, I partner with those folks and I say, what are your goals and how do I help you get there with my understanding of how we can strategically put together a program or elevate the message and the purpose of what you're trying to do, or embed that into other things that we're already doing with the employee experience. So, yeah, there's been a lot of paths forward to think about how whatever team I'm on, making myself available to anybody who has a great idea that's going to impact the employee experience and partner with them. But my core groups have been everything from HR and people teams to marketing to comms to the DEI teams, and I'll play in any space that they want me to.
It sounds like you would potentially in the future be an excellent consultant because you've touched on so many really interesting things. And a side note, I'm not sure if you're a parent or if you have nephews or nieces or anything, but uh, your your excitement for the gaming world would probably make you a super cool mom or super cool aunt. A lot of moms in my life, I'm not a parent, but all of my friends are. And if any of them knew anything about video games, their kids would probably think they were significantly cooler. Or maybe their kids would hate it because kids are weird. And sometimes they're like, Mom, don't embarrass me. But I think that's really cool. Uh it sounds like you do fit into pretty much any team that you could be put into. Do you lead a team right now? Are you a one-woman show?
So I do have a small team, and I've typically had a small team when I have had direct reports. But I think often it's just amazing if a company has a person at all dedicated to this. I think unless you are seeing like really a huge organization that can really resource to this, a lot of times you have one person, again, like partnering with all the different teams. And yeah, I mean, I'm always advocating to try and grow, but I think of what I do as working by committee always. Culture is not owned by one person. It just can't be, or it's not working. You got a problem. So actually, when I first came into the company I'm at now, we initially my title was like Director of Global Culture and Experience. And working with my manager, we really quickly decided that it was really about experience and engagement, and that culture is something that's owned by everybody. And that is what our company tenets, our values really express. And we wanted to make sure that we were, putting that in the title there. So I work with a committee of people. The company I'm at now is very global. So at each of the locations, we have a facilities person who is a de facto local experience and engagement person. So I work with them, meet with them every other week. And then I do one large global meeting every other week. And the opposite weeks when I'm not meeting with them independently, to meet with the whole group. And comms is part of that. DEI is part of that. Anybody else who wants to visit is part of that. And that we work collectively to say, here's the big global initiatives for the company that are coming up, things that are happening, share what's going on locally, inspire each other, because if you're doing something and your folks love it, probably it's going to be a hit in another location as well. And then we can also build synergy. So when people are moving from office to office, you're going to an on-site, you're, going to meet up with a team, or you're a remote employee and you want to go into an office, you really feel like, oh, these are all connected. This is the same place as I'm from. And you really understand the company that way. But that way also bringing as many people into the conversation and bringing good ideas to the table. I'm all about that.
I love that you can scale this up or scale it down. Like, obviously, you work at a pretty big company with a lot of resources, which is great, but you could also do this on a much smaller scale, right? Like, my main employee has about 20 people, and I could see there being a person, we have a one-woman HR department, but I can see her having a secondary person who really thinks about the culture of the organization and pushes it forward and meets with the leadership team, and just to make it a better place to work. So I don't know. Do you see this as something that could easily be scaled down for smaller organizations as well? Like, would it be worth it for a small organization to have one person specifically dedicated to this?
I think it'd be fantastic. I think a lot of times what typically happens is you have an office manager or an executive assistant type of role, and those often are the folks who have this kind of naturally built in because they're organized, they're great at connecting with people. So I think it's a great way to maybe give more responsibility or opportunity to somebody who's ready to take that next step and ready to sort of invest. I think that when you think about all the different things that can be encompassed by somebody in a single role like this, as I've mentioned, like DEI, I've managed all hands meetings, which meant I was working with the marketing team in every group. And then, you put on an event around an all hands meeting or a town hall or something, like really somebody who's thinking about all the components and ways that you can be, I work on anniversary programs. I've done holiday parties, company picnics, training and development, like I mentioned. I think launch parties, just, what are we doing on Friday? Let's have a good time. What are we doing for Valentine's Day? All of those kinds of things. So there's so much that one person can do. And I think that if you find the right person who's really motivated and organized, that's key. Somebody who has a lot of nice ideas is great. That's fun, but you really need somebody who can execute on them in a deeper level, and really think about like that engagement point where you're not just putting the ping pong table out there, but saying,
Yes.
I'm setting up a tournament, and not just are we doing a tournament, but everybody who's signing up for the tournament, I'm randomizing you. So you can't, Diana and Dora, you can't hang out with each other. You're always together. I'm going to put you with Tim and with Jane, and we're going to mix you up, and you're going to meet somebody new, and everybody should be practicing. So you're going to get 30 minutes to just hit the ball around and chat with each other. And then you're going to come in, and then at the next event we have, you're going to start talking to each other and introducing people to other things, really taking that first level of like, wouldn't this be fun if we did this thing, and saying like, where's that thread of engagement that really is thoughtful and strategic about what we need right now and how to connect people.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like you also do some of the content. Is that correct?
I do. I can't shake the producer that I always wanted to be. And I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic for me was that when I couldn't do physical events, the company I was with at the time, we shifted to online content. And really, I honestly had a blast because I got to work again with every team. Like, we really wanted to understand, especially because the gaming industry was booming during the pandemic, right? So I worked with our consumer insights team to say, like, what are we learning about players? What's happening right now? Okay, great. Now let's build a panel. And then I would work with them and really hone the questions, because as somebody who didn't understand really gaming in the way that many people do, I could say, well, you got to simplify this, or can you take some time to explain that, right? And then when we would say, oh, well, we want to have this DEI speaker in for something, it's like, great, okay, have you thought about how you're going to structure that conversation? Is it a panel? Is it a one-to-one? Is it a keynote? Like, and then we could also say, well, we just did a keynote. Let's not just give people the same content over and over again. We all knew people that were burning out on virtual content. As much as they wanted to be connected, it really needed to be delivered in a thoughtful way. And so I love getting like into the weeds and saying like, okay, like we're going to do a launch party for this game. Like, how do we do it? What does that look like? And I love rolling up my sleeves and getting right into the content too.
That's great. I personally am more of an execution kind of gal. And I really admire folks uh, who have like the really big ideas, who really think out of the box. I love like plucking those big ideas out of the sky and making them real. But being able to come up with all of those ideas is not that I can't do it, but it's not my forte. What are some of the biggest challenges that companies face when it comes to building a strong employee culture, and what is unique about event design for this particular purpose?
I think at this phase, it's the transition of like, what do we do in a hybrid world? Like nobody's cracked that nut, right? And like I said, in 17 years of doing this, like part of what's fun about it is it's never the same thing twice. It's constantly evolving, whether you're at a different company or it's a new product. The technology is different, the delivery of how you do things and connect with people, the kinds of events, or just topping yourself from whatever you did last year, right? But now we're in this whole new space where we're writing a new script, right? So it's getting people to, think about like, how do we bring people back in and how do we navigate through what that looks like?
Yeah, I understand. Um, I read a post by Julius Solaris on LinkedIn recently. He was speaking specifically about large conferences, but he said, if somebody can't make it to a large conference, give me a hologram. Don't put somebody on his from Zoom on a screen. And I thought
Mhm.
that's a really interesting take. um, and obviously that's a little bit separate from this conversation, but I do think when you have a global workforce and you're thinking about how to have them connect. Sometimes the faces on the Zoom screens are not it's not exactly enough, right?
Yeah, and I think again, like focusing on internal events, like we're really leaning into the company tenants, like what are our values and what are the sort of main things that we want everyone to connect to. So that's been really helpful as like a centralizing force to say, why are we doing something and how does it reinforce the business, right? So everybody understands.
Yeah.
And then that in turn is like, okay, so let's invest. Like, why are we bringing people together? Why are we bringing people in when we do it? And it really needs to be impactful. So we've been thinking about stacking events also. So if we're asking people to come in, not only do we want to encourage your manager to like bring as much of the team together as possible, and we have globally distributed teams, so this is, an interesting thing that's a work in progress. But when we do bring people together, we want there to be a number of things happening for you. So we're also building out sort of weeks of activities. So we have what we call celebration day, where it's like one big day of just mixing and mingling and everybody having fun and good times. And we're refining that as we go. But what does the rest of that week look like? If you've made the trip and that's a very casual kind of experience, what should the rest of that week stack look like? And now we're thinking like, how do we layer more DEI? Is there, performance training and development that we can be doing at the same time? How do we think about these things thematically? Again, tying back to the company values. So people really understand like there is a design behind these events, and we are crafted these things with purpose in mind. It's a little bit less of like just doing something because we did it before and we
Right.
will do it again, you know? I think that's why, at least personally, people miss holiday parties, but I didn't really find that the holiday party had as much impact. So really looking for things that maximize impact and build those connections. And again, if you can't get everybody together, try to find ways to do it locally. So the rest of the team has had a comparable experience. So you get your hologram, right? If I can't go to the conference,
Right.
I've got my own version over here, and then
Yeah.
everybody else had another version too. And then never forgetting always layering something in for your remote folks that can't make it in person. When I run we've got a new game that's on console now, and that's tough because you can't just play a mobile game on your phone, right? So you have to have a console or you have to come into a location. So we're looking at ways to make sure we still like run a raffle or run a competition or a tournament or some kind, just to make sure everyone feels connected and there's a way through for everybody that does have some substance and lets us everybody know that we're thinking about them even if they can't physically join in.
I love this. And you touched on something that I wanted to ask about, which is most event planners use dollars or viable leads to measure success at their events. What is your measure of success? Is it, retaining employees or
Yes, for sure. But I would say that we're still working on the best way to gather data. When I started out 50, 17, if however many years ago, right, it felt a lot like, okay, how many people showed up? Great. How many people showed up compared to how many people RSVP'd?
Mm,
Wonderful. Check, check, check. Did they have fun? What did we hear anecdotally? What was the gut check on how the event went, right? And now I'm really excited to be at a company and in a phase where people are really looking at the data and understanding where can we have the most impact? Is this working for people? So one of the things that we do, for instance, is like that celebration day event, right? So what we've been doing is tracking to see how like there's a correlation between people coming into our offices, either maybe the week before even, right? Or are they staying all week, even if they didn't have an on-site meeting that they were required to be at? Did they stick around a little bit longer? Did we see a bump in people coming in for a little bit more after that? Or, hey, most people don't come in Monday, Friday, but we've started to do some interactive sort of hands-on activities, or we do like a special meal or celebration for new hires and birthdays and things like that. Are we starting to see the numbers have an effect?
right.
So it's not just how many people showed up for that, but what is the bigger picture tie to those things? And then try to sort of replicate that out. And then looking at programs, of course, we're always like looking at like, how can these help move the needle? I'm not sure if somebody stays at a company, just because you had a celebration day, right? Or gave them a milestone gift or something like that. But I think that it's the combination and the collective experience then that you can build out with an always on kind of model where they know you're always thinking about them and there's always something. So we haven't really got enough data right now to understand like where we want to pull all those data points, but we're working towards building that foundational baseline because I'm also at a company right now that was small and then exploded in size during the pandemic globally. So we're kind of playing a bit of catch up to say, okay, we can't use the data points that worked when the company was 400 people because we're 2,500 now. And what does
Wow.
that look like? So it is actually kind of exciting to say, we don't have the data that we want. How do we build something to get us there? So, really implementing things like Workday to understand, like, do we know where our people are so we can understand how many people traveled to be at an event, right? Oh, wow, 17% of people traveled last year and then 30% of people traveled this year. Great, we're seeing higher engagement. And so really trying to build a baseline to understand where we're at now so we can then start to build further data. And then, I mean, you always go with the gut checks too, right? Like you always hear from people if something's working or not. They're always going to tell you. We are not afraid of feedback. It is a gift, and that's really, really helpful. And when we can combine that with the hard data, and we really get a sense of where people are, and then doing engagement surveys as well. Sometimes you can't get as detailed into people's the nuances of what is moving the needle for them, but we certainly can like identify areas. And again, that's something that, as the company grows, we're building that great baseline to understand and get more and more data, and maybe do some like pulsing as well to understand where those nuances are that we can move the needle for people.
That's great. What do you see what kind of, mistakes do you see companies making when it comes to employee culture? Like, what advice would you give to companies that are looking to improve their own culture?
So for me personally, I think that I see a lot of companies mandating people return, and I think that's a miscalculation. I think especially working in a tech space where there's talent in all pockets of the planet, you're really missing out on amazing talent by saying, well, I can only have people who can come in, or I'm going to really force them to when people don't want to. What I think is the better approach is investing in making those meaningful experiences and telling people to come in at targeted moments, right? Building out those weeks or those special days or those moments where it is worth the drive, or you're going to get on a plane and be away from your family for a week, but why you're there, what you're doing. It's going to be work, it's going to be play, you're going to come out of it with a deeper connection to the company. You're maybe going to do it every 6 months, or there's going to be something quarterly, but that gets expensive. And I mean, not just in like the cost of programs, because some programs don't cost very much money. I mean, I go back to that person who in the nonprofit space who taught me, you can make something look like $1 million and you don't have to have $1 million. That said, you do need people power to do it. So it goes back to your point about like even smaller companies. If you have a person who's really dedicated to this and you're willing to invest in a human resource, not just the event and experience resources, then I think you can really create wonderful experiences and mandate people to come in for those. But across the board mandates, I mean, that like having lunches or kombucha back on tap or warm cookies on Thursdays or whatever it might be, like I feel like that's kind of doing a bit of a disservice to employees and finding the right talent. But it isn't cheap to run programs that are targeted in these ways to move the needle every, few months.
Right. Yeah. I worked for an organization for 8 years, a global organization, people across like 30 countries. And my own team worked in 4 different countries, and we only actually got to see each other in person a couple times a year, like 2 or 3 times a year. But that was an intentional spending of money and resources and planning time to get us together for that. And I have to say, I felt even more close to them than I do with the people that I am in the office with now at my new job. I love this job, I love my team. I think they're wonderful, but the intentionality of that time together with my, you know, global team in the past is a lot different than like just coming in and kind of like shooting the shit with people in the office now. That's important, right? Like that sort of
Mhm.
seeing everybody every day. Um, I do believe that there is a time and a place for that, and it can make sense for lots of companies, but I agree it shouldn't be required because I felt very close with my last team, and I saw them all the time on Zoom, but only a couple times a year in person. And to this day, we've all long gone left that company. And to this day we all talk in our WhatsApp group, and we have like, bi-monthly, every other month, we have a little Zoom get together where we catch up. So it when you take the time to like build to help your teams build that culture, it sticks.
Yeah, and I think it's this combination of like the work and play, right? I think also, um, people, make the mistake of thinking that when they're doing something fun, it's not work. And
Right.
we have a bunch of great activities that we do. And I've run programs like, I'm one of the things I'm most proud of is I created a global day of service where like 1,000 people globally would volunteer to support veterans, military, and military families in 4 different countries. And one of my favorite stories was like there was a project where this person who was, a quality assurance person at the very beginning of their career was out there building a bench and talking to the gentleman next to him and was like, "Oh, so what's your job?" And he's like, "Well, I'm the COO of the company," right? And so they were all out there rolling up their sleeves and having fun. And, I mean, it was a great moment for the COO to understand maybe he needed more exposure. It was a great moment for the QA person to feel like, equal to, and that everyone was doing something together. It was, casual in the sense that everyone was there doing this, and it had a wonderful purpose that was part of a bigger initiative for the whole company, and everybody had a good time doing it. It was one of the most enjoyed days of the year that people looked forward to, and sort of scrambled to get their teams to get volunteer together. But then sometimes you would have more fun. Oh, well, we're all over here with the marketing team, but I don't know. I had a lot of fun with these other people, and we were painting walls and just talking. And then, next thing you know, like you're wearing your volunteer shirt at the office, and then people are like, "Oh, which team were you on, and where did you go?" And then it was just one of these things where it's like, "Oh, did we accidentally make connections and build network within the company while we were having fun? Eek! Oh no, we had
Oops.
fun." Like, oh no,
Yeah.
when we get together, it should always be like a meeting or a summit or have KPIs that come out of it or something. And sometimes it's just simply making those connections. And I know that people really miss that sort of water cooler interaction. And I think when you do really build thoughtful, engaging programs, like that is where you are doing that, right? You can't just
Yes.
expect everyone's going to pop into the kitchen to pour a glass of kombucha or cold brew or something and suddenly strike up a conversation. You really do need to orchestrate that,
Right.
especially now. And for me, especially in the tech industry, I mean, there truly are a lot of introverted people in this industry. So you really do need to give people the tools when they come in so they can build those connections. And then when they're back on their computers, know who to reach out to and have that more casual sort of WhatsApp kind of conversation. I can Slack somebody because I met them and I have a question. I can reach out to somebody. You start to slowly but surely build those connections, and then the extroverts help do their part with the introverts, and then but putting everyone in a situation where they can accidentally have fun and learn and grow in the process of that. I'm a big
Yeah.
proponent of that, and really trying to change the narrative around like how dare we have fun at work.
I love this. I could keep you on for a whole other hour, but I know you have to get back to work. So I'm going to go ahead and ask my closing question, so that I can let you go about the rest of your day. What's the coolest event that you have been to, either as an attendee or the planner or producer?
Let's see. Well, I planned a really epic holiday party at the in December of 2019, and I really thought like there was nothing I could do better than that. And like I was like, I'm gonna drop the mic. I'm never gonna plan another holiday party again. Little did I know what was coming in 2020, and I have not planned a holiday party since. But I would love to give the real credit. The thing that really comes to mind is not something I planned, but rather recently, I guess 6 months or so ago, I went to an event. There's a wonderful events group that's emerged through the years here in Los Angeles called FET. And they get together planners and vendors, and they brought us all to the LA Coliseum. And it's not far from my house. It's an iconic, Los Angeles space. And but I think I'd only been inside once before, and it's utterly beautiful. And they had created this new event deck that, because the building's been there, the stadium's been there for almost 100 years now. It's about to host its third Olympics coming up in 2028. It's been there forever.
Wow.
They built a new space onto it, so you could actually see over the edge of the stadium and over the whole city. So, I thought I'm going to go to this event. It's right by my house. I'm going to leave after just a little bit. I don't know. I'll see if I know anybody there. And it was one of those events that was planned, I thought, really well, because not only was the food better at like a stadium kind of space than you expected, But like then they had a tour and you could go see into the locker rooms and you got sort of behind the scenes and you could go out on the grass and like be on the field and then get the stories from what was happening back when Kanye West played his concert here, and here's the ins and outs of like all these little details. And they took us into these amazing spaces where it wasn't just a coffee table, but the coffee table was like a replica of the stadium. I mean, like just the attention to detail. And as a planner, you just stop at some point getting wowed by things and everywhere
Yeah.
we turned. And then I thought, okay, so now I'm they said to stick around to the end for something great, but I'm gonna have to go. And the next thing you know, they brought out the USC marching band. And it was like, what? This is amazing. And everybody's energy got all pumped up again. And then they brought out desserts and like, and then at the end, they did a fireworks show, which we're like, that's so cool. We've all seen fireworks. And then they did a drone show. And it was,
Holy
I mean, I
moly.
feel like I've seen them online, but like there is nothing like seeing a drone show in the night sky in Los Angeles, like playing LA music, hip hop to drones. And, it was just one of those things where they had just really pulled out all the stops. They reminded me of an event where like you just never stop. I had my previous one of my best managers ever. His goal was for us to always create remarkable events, and not in the sense of like it's so fancy or expensive, but it's worth remarking on. It's something you
Mm.
want to talk about afterwards. You can't stop thinking about it and you want to tell people about. And this to me, I was sending people videos. I mean, like you wouldn't believe it. And they lit up the flame and like all these wonderful things were happening, in this iconic space that was just down the street from me and I drive by all the time, but I don't think about in that way. And it really like lit a fire in me to be excited about my work and what I could do and just reminded about how fun it was. So it was the true kind of remarkable event that I aspire to make. And as we start to do so much more in person again in really big and meaningful ways, it was a really special event at a wonderful time that I just am so thankful that group put together, and they take a lot of care in Los Angeles to build the same kind of networks and awareness that you do here. So I want to just give that a shout out and thank you for doing that kind of work across the whole country for all of us.
Um, w- I don't think that I have ever thought about the word remarkable in that way, like something that you want to remark on. You have, like, completely you have given me this is like one of the most valuable things you've said the whole conversation. I had a manager many years ago before I got into events who said that she hated when people use the word awesome sort of casually. She was like, "Awesome is for when something really makes you feel awe. It, like, gives you pause." And I always thought, wow, I had never thought about the word awesome. That was, like, when I was still in my 20s, and I was using awesome all the time, and I was like, "Oh, I that that's so fascinating. I would never have thought about that word that way." And so remarkable, this is another thing that I'm gonna file away and I'm gonna think about every time I'm thinking about an activation or something that needs to surprise and delight attendees. Thank you so much. I That's gonna be my biggest takeaway from this conversation, I think.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's great. And it's one thing that no matter how big your budget is or how brief your event is, there's always a way to make it remarkable.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much. You've given me more time than I originally intended, and I'm really grateful for it. For those who want to learn more about you and your work, where can they go for more information?
Well, hopefully you can share my LinkedIn profile,
Sure will.
Diana Diller, easy to find. Reach out, let's connect. And if you're on the Vendery, which Dora is where you found me, we can also connect there. Shoot me a Slack. And you can also reach me at dianadiller22 at Yahoo.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Diana. And thanks to our dear listeners and Meeting Protocol fans for checking out this episode. Don't forget to go to meetingprotocol.org where you can sign up for our newsletter that includes links to new podcasts, a CMP tip of the month, and tons of resources for all things related to meeting professionals and CMPs. Thanks.